part of the Press Play Podcast Network.
Hi, everyone. Thanks for stopping by to Sable Brothers on the Baseline podcast right here on the Press Play Podcast Network. We're your hosts, John Sable.
And I'm Scott Sable.
Thanks for tuning in, everyone. We're back from about a month off. We had some good time off doing some family vacation stuff, busy with Browns stuff. But now we're back in the swing of things. And Scott, we have a tremendous guest here with us, someone that our listeners and any avid Indians fan growing up in the 90s knows really well.
And I remember our guest too, when he came up before the Indians, Indians were good in the 90s too. He came up in that time, kind of in the middle from the, in the middle of the late 1980s, early 1990s. And then he kind of blossomed into the picture that we remember. And of course, played for the team that we all remember.
And that man is three-time All-Star and a member of the Cleveland Guardians Hall of Fame and former Indians pitcher, Charles Nagy. Charlie, thanks so much for taking the time with us today.
No, thanks for having me.
So fans real quick would love to know, what are you doing these days? I know recently you were helping out with the Guardians radio broadcast on a road trip
right
about a month or so ago. But what are you doing now? Are you doing some broadcasting? I know you were a pitching coach for a little bit there, but what is Charles Nagy up to these days?
We just recently dropped our youngest off at college for sophomore year down at Baylor, and now just driving my wife crazy a little bit. But for the most part, it was nice that, Curtis gave me a call. I did it before a few years back when the then Indians were in Anaheim, filled in on the radio and did it for this road trip because Hammy, they had their first grandson. So it was fun. It was fun to get out and to see the team. I've been following the team in the newspapers and, watching a few games here and there, but it was nice to get there and see them in person and see how they're playing.
Is broadcasting something you always wanted to try, even when you were a player, looking down the road, once your career was finished?
I never really thought about it, but, the old face for radio thing that, but no, it was just, an opportunity that, they asked, and I was, that'd be great. It'd be a lot of fun. So we'll see where it goes from there.
Now, Charlie, you were doing some pitching coach for the Diamondbacks and the Angels for about 7 seasons. I think the last time you were with the Angels, 2018, maybe.
Yes.
Is that something you still want to maybe get back into coaching, maybe managing, or you still, you had that and want to try a different adventure?
It's a possibility, I got let go by the Angels at the end of Mike's contract. When that ended, they decided to clean house and a little bit and go a different way. And at that time, then all of a sudden COVID hit. So it was a good time to be out of the game, I guess. But looking forward, it was also a good time because my youngest was, graduating high school and going through the whole college thing with her was, it's just a great experience and really enjoyed doing that. And now, we'll see what happens going forward. A lot of times it's not what you want to do. Sometimes it's, maybe if the phone rings or something like that, but I'm always interested. I love coaching. It was fun. It's, getting back in the game, being part of the game, and the kids are great and teaching baseball and, it's baseball and I enjoy that very much.
Where is home for you right now?
We live in San Diego.
Okay.
A little town north of San Diego, Solana Beach.
So you grew up in New England, is that correct?
I did. Grew up in Connecticut, yes.
Connecticut. So you remember the Cape Cod Baseball League, which I believe you played in too, right? In the 1980s?
87, I played that summer in Harwich Mariners.
Excellent. So take us back. Was baseball your first love? Did you play other sports in high school growing up, or was baseball the only, or other sports part of your growing up?
Yeah, no, I had 2 brothers. It was football, basketball, baseball, just kind of went with the seasons. We were a big football family. My older brother played football in college and he still coaches football. He coaches over here at Allegheny College. He's a head coach over here in Meadville, PA, he's getting ready for the season right now. So, and then, baseball, we all played baseball, and baseball just, kind of picked me, I guess. And that's what, went to college to play baseball.
Charlie, when you broke in with the Indians, way back in 1990, I mean, that franchise was nowhere near what it was in the mid 90s. There was a lot of moving and shaking, playing at the old stadium, influx of young, unproven talent. No one knew what would have happened and what did happen.
Right.
But at that time, that franchise, they were really bad. I mean, my brother and I were just talking before you came on. Scott, how many wins did they have in that year?
I think it might have been the 91 season. I think there was something like 60 wins, 55 wins. If I remember, because I remember in high school and we had high hopes, and looking back, and there wasn't a lot there, but looking back also, there were seeds of something. And like my brother said, those seeds, who would have thought in 5 years you guys would be in the World Series? But take us back to those early Indians teams.
I mean, I got drafted. Then when I came up with the Indians, they had an older team. And they had some really good pitchers on the team, though, also, which was very helpful to me. Greg Swindell, Tom Candiotti kind of took me under their wing. Buddy Black was here at the time before he got traded away, who's still a very close and dear friend of mine. And, those guys kind of showed me the ropes early on. And, John Hart and those guys from Baltimore had just come over, and then they decided to make the switch, got rid of all the veterans and decided to go young. 1990, they had, Sandy was the rookie of the year that year.
Yep.
We had Carlos, and I guess Chris James was another piece of that puzzle that came over from San Diego. And they decided to, just go young and, build from there. And then, the new stadium got passed and everything was geared towards 1994.
There was this picture, I remember, maybe Bobby DiBiasio tweeted it. It was a picture of you in your early 90s uniform, maybe 92, 93. Do you know where I'm going with this?
Yeah, Mel Harder.
Yeah. Yes. I didn't know if it was Mel Harder or Bob Feller. You guys were throwing, just playing catch on the construction site, which was then going to be Jacobs Field.
Right. Yeah, it was Mel.
Wow. Yeah, it's pretty crazy to think about when in that moment, when you were in that picture, you obviously knew who Mel Harder was, but
right.
I mean, knowing the era and the change into a new ballpark and being in that, perspective of, hey, this was an old ballpark, new ballpark, a massive generational shift in fan base, but also in the franchise, and having a guy like Mel Harder, who was one of the all-time greats in the franchise. That had been a pretty cool moment. And maybe at that time you were young. Did you even realize the moment you were in that little picture?
Realized the change that was coming to Cleveland with the new stadium, how excited everybody was. You drive right past that lot, every day on the way to the stadium, take that loop around, go to the old stadium. So I knew what was there beforehand, which really wasn't much. And then, to be down there, I was very fortunate. Mel was always very kind to me, always liked to talk to me about, the curveball. And Bob was always, very gracious with his time with me also. And, always loved to talk pitching, and it was always fun to sit down and just listen to those guys talk. And, I remember that day very vividly because it was myself and, like you said, Sandy. I didn't even think Carlos was in uniform that day too. And, it was just, they had already started to dig the site, and, they chalked off some lines that were going to be a pitching mound and home plate. And we were just standing there, and someone took that photo, and, it ended up being on the tickets for, that when the Jacobs Field opened.
So do you have any good Cleveland Stadium stories? I mean, looking back, we've heard about some weird ones here with that old ballpark, and it certainly wasn't as friendly as the new parks. No. And any good stories playing there and walking through there and go, what's going on here? Anything going on that you remember?
Just that it was a really long walk from the dugout to the clubhouse, and then you had to climb some stairs. We had an auxiliary clubhouse upstairs, which was, probably my more fun place to go to hang out, because you just kind of got away from everything because the clubhouse was so small. Everybody was on top of each other. Light bulbs getting not broken, because people were upset on the way back. So it was a long, dark, dingy walk back to the clubhouse or the dugout. The dugout steps were really steep going up and down. Guys fell all the time coming back into the dugout. But it was, and like you guys said, it was full two times a year, usually July 4th for fireworks and opening day. You had a big crowds. And other than that, you pretty much knew who was in the stands each night. So you're, very friendly with the people in the stands.
We had Ron Pruitt on a few months back, and he told us a funny Municipal Stadium story. Scott and I grew up going to that stadium, and he told us one story that many people probably didn't know was at the time when he was playing, he didn't know that there was in the team. A lot of players didn't even know that there was a auxiliary batting cage beyond right field that was actually remember that, Scott? It was like a shed.
I do remember that.
And that it was used mainly for like equipment for the Browns, and that they didn't realize it was there. The players, no one ever gave them the memo, Charlie, that it was there until like midway through the season. And then they, I forget what year that would have been, Scott, like 83 or something.
Yeah. And they had to pull out to use it. They had to pull out all the Brown stuff just to get it. And then they had to drag it out, like you said, because they didn't know it was there.
Oh, wow. Yeah. I mean, there's, little rooms all over the place in that. Mm-hmm. And it was just finding them. And once they did, I mean, the video room that they created upstairs was just a small little room, and it just was packed with video, and they just, found any space they could and started to finally utilize it the best they could.
Charlie, are you like nostalgic memorabilia guy?
No, I'm not a collector much at all. I don't really have much stuff.
I was going to say, did you take anything from the Municipal Stadium, like your locker nameplate or anything like that? Or
no, I did not. No.
We always hear sometimes guys do that, or they take something from it. We had Eric Metcalf on, former, Browns running back and wide receiver, kick returner. He's like, I wish I had a seat. He said he wished he had a seat there from the dog pound, but always curious to know about that kind of stuff. All right. So you guys move into Jacobs Field, magical season 94, season cut short. Unfortunately, you guys were on the rise. And then your team took the entire Major League Baseball by storm in 95. Right. Going to the World Series, clinching the division, all that good stuff. Was there a point in time, Charlie, during that 95 season that you knew something was special, or was it maybe in 94 when things started to gel after those few years of those young talent at Municipal Stadium and then the move in?
It was in 94. We knew even leading into 94, 93, the years that certain guys were having, Kenny and Albert and Carlos, the way they were playing. And, we had Paul Sorrento at first, who was, a good player, and the upcoming Jim Thome and Manny Ramirez. So we saw what could be. And then in 94, when we got, Dennis and Eddie, were signed, veteran influences, guys who have won in the past, and they came over and, basically taught us how to win. And just went from there in 94. And like you said, unfortunately, things happened with the strike, and we were just a couple games. I think we were neck and neck with Chicago at the time. Mm-hmm. So, and then we were just hopeful that we were going to come back and play. And we just had the feeling that we were going to make the playoffs that year. And then, the strike cap and everything got canceled. And leading into spring training, we were just chomping at the bit. It seemed everybody was just calling me, when's this going to end? When's this going to end? And then it did end. And, everybody, rushed down to Winter Haven, Florida, and just picked up where we left off in 94.
Scott, I think weren't the Indians one game back in Chicago when the strike went into effect? I believe
so. Yeah. And then if I remember correctly, you guys in 95 won the division in like the middle, about this time of the year. You guys are 144, won it by 30 some odd games. I remember that and thinking, I don't know if this has ever been done. I mean, you blew everybody out of the water in 95.
Right. Yeah. It was amazing. Guys our guys could hit before that. And then in 94, they just, the lineup just every day, just from 1 through 9, just putting together runs and, just talking to pitchers on the other team and how nobody wanted to pitch, especially at home against us, let alone on the road. But nobody wanted to face us. And it was, and they were verbal about it. And it was just like, well, you guys have already lost then. So yeah, it was good to hear.
So let's go back a couple of years there to the 92 All-Star Game. I remember watching this, and I didn't realize that you're one of the only pitchers since the DH, and maybe the only one to get a hit in an All-Star Game. Is that right?
Yeah, the last one. Since then. Yeah.
Since then, yeah. And you got that off of a former Indians closer I remember growing up watching, Doug Jones.
Yeah.
Doug Jones. And did you go up with a helmet that was a Texas Rangers helmet?
Yep, Ruben Sierra's helmet, I believe. Yeah, wow. Everybody asked about that.
That's crazy.
Yeah, I came in from pitching, and I just took a big, deep breath, and was just happy that was over with. I was able to get through that. And then Tom Kelly comes up and says, "Hey, we ran out of players. You got to hit." I'm like, "You're screwing with me." And he's like, "No. Grab a bat. You're up first." And I'm like, "All right." So I'm left-handed, and everybody's scrounging for a helmet, and that happened to be the one. And the funniest thing was, okay, so I grab a bat, weight at bat, I start swinging. I forget who was on deck, but he looks at me and he says, "Hey, this guy's got a great changeup." I'm like, "Yeah, I know. I played with him for like 4 years."
Right.
So
Yeah, there's 3 different kinds of changeups: slow, slower, and slower.
Slow, slower, and slower, and that's all he threw. And I just looked for the first thing, and I swung as hard as I could, and I hit it off the end of the bat. And Jonesy wasn't really known for his fielding, and he didn't really make much of an effort. And next thing you know, I just ended up on first base.
Charlie, a lot of pitchers didn't like hitting, especially when interleague came in years later. And obviously you weren't one of those guys that liked hitting. Was that something you just completely dreaded just because of, you're afraid of maybe getting hurt or pulling something, just getting out of routine?
No, I mean, I wish we could have hit more. It was just few and far between for us being in the American League. I didn't really, we didn't ever got a chance to touch a bat. So all we were told to do is just go shag, because, that's all we did for like an hour every day. Our hitters hit, and they got ready for the game, and we shagged. And even when interleague play started, it was just like a week before, maybe go in the cage and bunt a few and that sort of thing. So, but I enjoyed it very much. And it just, for a lot of reasons, just because it was fun, something different to do. And the other thing, it just gave you that different perspective, never really stood in the box before in quite some time. And all of a sudden you look out and it's like, man, that guy's close. Or just a strike zone, the ball comes in, it looks like it's way outside and the guy calls it a strike. You're like, just to get that perspective on things, just it's like, ooh, never hadn't had that in a long time.
Are you bummed that the DH now is into effect league wide and the pitchers don't hit anymore? As a fan now looking back at it?
Yeah, as a fan, I am. I kind of, differentiated to 2 leagues, the American League and the National League, but now, it is what it is. And you just go from there. But I kind of liked it when the pitchers hit it. It's just a different game, different strategy. And now the strategy is all the same.
So you mentioned your kids, your youngest is going off to college. Do they ever call, you up on YouTube looking at a clip and go, hey, Dad, what was this back in the day? Because I'm sure they weren't around when you played. Do they ever go back and kind of check you out back in the 90s on YouTube, on the internet?
They don't really check me out. They ask me questions because somebody will ask them something about whether it's baseball or somebody that I played with, or, that wasn't your dad, or blah, blah, blah. And then they'll call me up and, that sort of thing. But It's pretty funny. The other day, we were talking about the game with my youngest and her boyfriend, and talking about, it's kind of slow and all this other stuff. And so I said, yeah, they should let the coaches and the managers argue more, because they're just not allowed to even come out of the dugout. So then I just showed them a clip of that old, when Lou Piniella was kicking his hat across the field at Jacobs Field that one day. And they were just in stitches. They're like, who is that? And it's like, what is he doing? And they just thought it was the greatest, funniest thing ever. And, we did too at the time. And it was just part of the entertainment of baseball. Right. And that just doesn't happen that much anymore. So, and they were like, yeah, we'd love to see that.
And we'll have more from Charlie Nagy right after this.
Hey everybody, it's Sam Amico from Cavs on the Break NBA podcast. Be sure to give us a listen for all your Cleveland Cavaliers recaps, analysis, breakdowns, draft talk, free agency. The list goes on and on. Give us a listen, Cavs on the Break NBA podcast.
The R&R podcast going to be rocking and rolling with you because football season is underway. College, Ohio State, the Power Fives, the MAC, the Browns. Michael Regai, are you ready to rock and roll with some football?
Kenny, I've been ready. This is our time of year. This is what R&R is all about. We're going to be with you every week. Kenny just said it. Browns, NFL, Ohio State centric. So you got to stay with us all fall and winter long here on R&R.
That's right. The Regai and Rhoda podcast coming to you here on the Press Play Podcast Network. Subscribe now and don't miss a show.
What's up, everyone? Chase Smith here, host of the Chase Smith Podcast, and my podcast reflects who I am. My hobbies, my interests, my passions, my curiosities, my careers, my questions, and my family. I'll spend time talking about all types of sports, movies, TV shows, trending news stories, and other cultural events, and even faith. This is who I am, and I hope I can get to know you as well. Join me on the Chase Smith Podcast, and let's have some thought-provoking conversations, only on the Press Play Podcast Network.
Well, Charles has 8 of them tonight, and Alisea looks at a called third strike for the second out of the inning.
And Nagy just strikes out Hosey on a nasty breaking ball down and in.
And Palmeiro and Bonilla coming up, and Nagy strikes them both out.
Strikeout number 4 for Charles Nagy.
That time, Nagy makes a good pitch.
Well, the key outs in this game were all strikeouts by Charles Nagy. That is number 12 for Nagy in 6 innings.
Runs the fastball in and gets him. Pena down on strikes. Nagy has 4 in the first 2.
Strike 3 with a changeup. And so the Orioles, with 2 men on and 1 man out, and Palmeiro and Bonilla coming up, and Nagy strikes them both out.
When we go back to those 90s teams, Charlie, obviously you guys fell short in 95 and then again 96, 97. But when you guys lost in 95, was there like a sense of, you know what, we'll be back? Or, you know, nothing's guaranteed, obviously, but
Right.
the confidence and then the feeling that we'll be back, but you didn't get back there for 2 years. What was that? I mean, obviously a massive disappointment. You guys went up against arguably the best rotation in the history of the game.
Right.
Bad luck for Cleveland, obviously.
Right. Yeah, that was the pitching against the hitting. We had the best hitting. They had the best pitching. And, you know, unfortunately they won out. But yeah, when the season ended, you know, lost opportunity, but we knew we'd be back. You know, we knew, you know, the next year or the year after that we'd get back to the World Series and, you know, eventually win one. But unfortunately that didn't happen. But, you know, just the confidence had built and, you know, confidence and or cockiness, as some people, you know, Tab does at the time. But, you know, we knew we were a good team and, you know, we were ready to go up against, you know, the other big boys and, you know, get to the playoffs year in, year out.
Any good stories from the mid late 90s? I mean, you had a lot of characters on the team. You know, we've heard about the Albert Bell, Mr. Freeze story with him with the thermostat and a few other stories. Any good family friendly stories that you remember that looking back at the time might not have been all that funny, but now you can kind of get a good laugh about it?
It's funny sometimes, just the people that we had in the locker room. All of a sudden, you know, we had Dave Winfield, we had Cecil Fielder, Kevin Mitchell, you know, and just the likes of them and just roaming around. And they're on the bench all the time. They're just, you know, guys that you just didn't expect to be on your team. And they were, and it was just great. And just, you know, on the planes and hanging out with them, and they're playing poker in the back, and it's just like, holy crud, this 5 years ago, like you said, could never imagine that this would be going on in Cleveland, but it was. As far, you know, Albert was, you know, Albert, you know, he walk on eggshells around him sometimes, but, you know, him and I were really good friends. We came up together and had, you know, but he did things and he kept you on your toes, and, you know, stayed out of his way at times, and other times, you know, he was, you know, you sat down, you just talked baseball. He wanted to play chess or, you know, do crosswords and stuff like that with you. Memorable stories, you know, competitions around the ping pong table, you know, Oral trying to, you know, not just beat you, but humiliate you by, you know, taking off his shower shoe and giving you 10 points and, you know, crushing you by, you know, 21 to 9 or something like that with a shower shoe. That was just not fun right there. It was embarrassing.
Wow.
So you just didn't play with them. But, you know, it's just a good bunch of guys, and, you know, we all got along together, and we all knew what our job was and went out and did it.
So Earl Hershiser would beat guys by 20 plus points in ping pong with his like shower sandal?
Shower shoe. Yeah. He would want to humiliate you. Him and Wayne Kirby had some really intense matches, and a few other, you know, Omar was really good at ping pong also. So he really gave him a good run for his money. So it got highly competitive in there.
So we had Brian Anderson on recently, and you know, he's now obviously the color analyst for the Rays. And before moving back to Cleveland, I worked down in Tampa for 8.5 years. So I got to know Brian a little bit, and he told us the background story and then the whole story of Jason Grimsley climbing through the rafters to retrieve Albert Bell's bat in Chicago after the court.
Yeah, I didn't know if I should bring that up, but yeah, that was another great one.
Feel free.
So
I just saw Jason. Yeah, Jason's here for the golf tournament. So I was on the bus yesterday, and I guess he's got a book coming out, and that's a big part of the book too, is that, that time in Chicago when all that happened. And that was just an unbelievable thing that, to go up through the rafters and come down and swap bats out, and and
Mission Impossible the whole way.
Exactly.
Where were you when that was going on? You weren't pitching that day, were you? You were just probably on the bench in the bullpen?
Yeah, just hanging out.
And you had no idea what was going on?
No idea it was going on. Yeah.
How'd you find out?
When everybody else found out the next day, because they replaced a black Albert Bell bat with a white Paul Sorrento Wilson model, something like that. And it was just like, who knows? But yeah. And then all heck kind of broke loose after that.
Wow. Can you imagine that happening now? Something like that with social media, how that would have been blown out of proportion, and probably would have had, a couple weeks legs in the media circuit if something like that happened today.
Oh, without a doubt. Yeah.
So baseball now, at least in the last 5 to 10 years, I would say it's changed somewhat. You have almost like a 3 outcome sport. There's a lot of, the balls aren't put in play as much. You have a lot of guys striking out a lot more. The game has changed. I mean, maybe not the way they play it, but when you look at the numbers, it's a lot different than what it was even in the early mid 2000s. Is it a game that you like watching? Do you wish baseball would kind of shift back to where it was? What's your stance on that?
I mean, there's some good things. It's, the athleticism of the players is obviously top notch nowadays. Mm-hmm. We had great athletes back then, but the training the way they train and prepare and eat and all the other stuff and the information that they get, the analytics side of everything is, but it has changed the game to the point where, it can be tough to watch at times, because it's either a home run or a strikeout, the outcomes. And, you go from 0-2 counts a lot from a pitching standpoint to, 3-2 counts and long games. The games seem to drag on at times. And, but what they do out there and how hard and how far they hit the ball is pretty amazing. And nowadays, if you're not throwing 95 to 100, right, it seems like every team has, everybody's coming out of the bullpen doing that. But that's very impressive also to watch. But in our day, it was you try to use the least amount of pitchers in a game as possible. And now it doesn't matter how many pitchers you use in a game. So we're trying to change.
Yeah, if you go 5-6 innings, and that's considered a good outing. Back then, 5-6 innings, and that was not a good thing.
Right, you're wearing out your bullpen. You're not helping your team. So, yeah, you didn't train for that either. I mean, you were conditioned to do that, to pitch deeper into games, and you were taught, how to pitch, how to pitch to go through the lineup the third time around, and to understand what you needed to do to get, to pitch deep in games and, not waste, not throw 150 pitches.
Does that change as a pitching coach? Would that change your approach as a coach compared to coaching a player 10 or 15 years ago, knowing that the pitching and them only pitching potentially 5-6 innings is different now than what it was then? Does that change your approach?
It never changed mine. I mean, I always, wanted my guys, or I always went into it with the thought and letting everybody know, I want my guys to pitch innings. If starters pitch innings, it takes a big burden off the bullpen, and, it means you're successful and good things are going to happen. So I always tried to, emphasize, try and get guys out early in the counts, strike 1, strike 2, you don't have to go 3-2, try and fool them all the time. But that's things are valued differently now. Strikeouts are valued more than just outs these days, it seems, or good defense. Use the defense. But I always tried to emphasize, and always wanted my guys to pitch deep in the ball games.
I remember there was a guy, it might have been Greg Maddux, I don't remember, back in the mid-late 90s. He pitched a complete game shutout, and it was 76 pitches.
Yeah,
that's unheard of today. I mean, talk about one of the most efficient pitchers out there, but you don't see that today.
No. Yeah, he probably struck out about 5 or 6 guys, but
right
in the midst of that. But yeah, now it's, the high strikeout, and with the high strikeout comes high pitch counts. So you're not going to be out there that long.
So Charlie, who would not like this era of pitching in baseball? Bob Feller.
Right.
I've read a few Bob Feller books, and I got to meet him when I was young. And just knowing how he was, and if hearing stories of other previous players and members of the organization just being around him and everything, and he would not like this era of pitching, and he would probably call it the babying of pitchers and pitch counts and all that stuff. But it is kind of funny. A lot of things have changed obviously since then.
I think Bob was probably just getting loose after his 75th pitch. He was just kind of starting to settle in right there, and he had another 75 to go, 75 in him. So I remember, him talking about that. He was geared to go 9, 10, 11, 12 innings, whatever. And that's what they did back then. And they pitched, 300 plus innings a year in a 4-man rotation. Nowadays, now we have 6-man rotations. Everybody pitches once a week and 5, 6 innings. And that's a great outing. So,
yeah, you hear stories, guys back in like the 20s, 30s and 40s pitching, back-to-back complete game, 9-inning games, 18 innings over 200 pitch counts, something crazy like that. Definitely odd and weird to think about it that way. Okay, 2 more questions, Charlie, and then we have some rapid fire questions, and then we'll let you go. Real quick, I know you've probably been asked this question quite a bit about 97 and coming up short again. Do you wish you were maybe 2 inches taller on that last hit, giving up that game?
I wish I had a bigger glove. Yeah. Or whatever. But yeah. So yeah, I mean, it's just some that I'll have to live with, it just tipped off the top of my glove. One of those things, the ball came, it was one of those knuckleballs that come back at you and you kind of freeze because you think it's coming harder, and then boom. So, or I tipped it a little higher and Omar could have caught it.
Yeah, it was right off the glove, man. I remember watching that as does Scott too. You still keep in contact with a lot of those guys on the 95, 97, and of course throughout the whole 90s team. And a lot of the guys that we've talked to, they kind of embraced that era and they embraced that game. They don't look down upon it anymore. It seems like some are over it. Mike Hargrove, your manager, says, I remember him listening to an interview when he was asked that question, even like last year, and he says, I'll let you know when I get over it, because I still haven't gotten over it. Are you that way, or have you kind of built that bridge over it?
I've kind of built the bridge over it. Everybody left everything that they had on the field that night. I mean, it was a long game. It was after midnight when that was going on. Guys played their hearts out. We played our hearts out that whole series, and just unfortunately that things didn't work out for us in the end. But you have to move on, and we pretty much have. It's disappointing. You still look back and because we never made the World Series after that as a team.
Yeah, and the franchise has since gone to a couple, and I should say one in 16, and probably could have got there in 07 if they didn't blow it. But Scott, I know we were listening to a game with Charlie on the radio recently in that road trip, and you and I were talking about what your thoughts were on this current Guardians team.
Right.
What do you think about their chances, the way they're built, and then going forward?
I think, with the division that we're in, that was one of the things that always played in our favor because, we Kansas City, Detroit, Chicago, they have a really good chance probably to win the division this year as opposed to a wild card. I believe a better chance to do that. Minnesota. But, they play hard. It's a good young team. They have good at-bats, long at-bats. They see a lot of pitches. They wear the other team down. They hustle. They put stress on the defense on the other side of it. They play smart baseball. They play good defensively, solid defensive baseball, and they got good pitching, and they got arguably one of the best closers in the game right now, who's just a shutdown piece in the 9th inning. So if they have any kind of lead or if the game's close, they know he's coming in and, the game's going to go their way.
They're definitely built for the long haul with those young guys coming up too.
No question. So, Charlie, we're going to start a rapid fire. There's just a handful of fun questions here, and, it won't take too much of your time. And our first question has to do with specifically baseball, and then we're going to get to some non-baseball questions. The one hitter you didn't look forward to facing throughout your career?
All of them. Yeah, everybody asks that, who was the toughest hitter, and I was like, they are all tough. It's just, different circumstances and, different situations. There's some guys that came to the plate, you're like, uh-oh, bases loaded or something like that, and you see any, big guy coming up, or it's just, there were certain lineups that were harder than others too, or, certain places that you like to pitch as opposed to others. Like I hated pitching in Minnesota in that dome. It was just horrible.
Mm-hmm.
So I knew it coming up, and, the team that they had, and, weird things happened in there. And so I didn't really care for that very much, as opposed to, or Seattle. Seattle wasn't an easy place to pitch either. I mean, it was a fast. It just seemed like everything was loud. You're throwing the ball from second base, it felt like, but you still had to go out and compete and try and give your team a chance to win.
Yeah, it sounds like those domes of the 80s and 90s were not very friendly for some pitchers.
No, not at all. Balls just bounced differently. They had, the outfield, the walls were really close in right field.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah.
You mentioned those two ballparks you didn't like pitching in, but besides probably Jacobs Field, what were some of the ballparks you loved pitching in?
I grew up back east, as you guys had mentioned. So Yankee Stadium and Fenway Park, always a lot of fun for me, because that's where I went and watched games when I was growing up. So it was always fun and family on hand, to watch those games. So it was always great to go out. And plus they had really good teams. So you're pitching against, the better lineups in the league. And that was always a great challenge also.
When was the last time you were up at Cape Cod to watch a game? My buddy actually runs the airport up there in Chatham. And so we've been up there a couple of times. That honestly, one of the most fun experiences I've had ever watching the game. And I know it's been a long time, but have you been up there in the last several years, couple decades to see a game?
No, the last time I was in Cape Cod was the day I left in '87,
Really?
after our last game of the season. Yeah, I went back to school, University of Connecticut, and I haven't been back since.
Charlie, so many great memories of the 90s, but do you have one particular favorite one with the Indians?
The celebrations, all the celebrations, whether we just, clinched the division, raising a flag, just sharing stuff like that with the fans, teammates. It was always fun to celebrate, and I always had the attitude whenever you get a chance to celebrate, you got to celebrate, because you never know when it's going to be your last. Even when we lost in '95, that celebration we had here in, downtown Cleveland, because I happen to be in a hotel room overlooking the square right now, and all the fans that came out that day. And when we had clinched in Seattle and we flew home all night, and just the amount of people that were at the airport that night, it was just, it was just great. And it was just so much fun. And just, just to see the city and how everything changed in a renaissance with the downtown area because of the stadium. It was, so that's a lot more than one, but sorry about that.
No, that's fine.
That's great.
Do you have a favorite restaurant that you would frequent when you played, back in the mid '90s?
We lived out in Westlake. So the Cabin Club, we used to go there, my wife and I, for dinner a lot. And then a buddy opened a place in Rocky River, the Rocky River Brewing Company. So that became a spot for us to go all the time also. So Gary and Bob Cintron. And so still go there whenever we come into town. Really good friends of ours also, by the way. So it's always great coming back. We enjoy it very much.
You probably make it back, maybe once or twice a year, if that?
A couple times. Yeah, it was always, and then when I was coaching, when we come back, that was, stay for a little bit longer, but definitely make a point of it. And now this is the easiest route for me to get to Meadville, PA, is to come through Cleveland or to go watch my brother play. Yeah. Right. So usually just fly into here and either go over there. Last year we came in, watched them go down and play at Worcester.
Oh, nice. Very cool. Last question for you, then we'll let you go. And this is always a fun one because we always like asking this. I don't know, are you TV streaming guy? And if you are, do you have a favorite show that you watch or a show that you watch with your kids or your wife?
I'm not really a big streaming guy. I'm still just regular cable, watch the local, Channel 8, the news. I like watching the news and the shows that come on after. That's how I usually, know what time it is. But yeah, we've streamed some shows, and off the top of my head, I really can't remember what we have, but we've watched what pretty much everybody else has watched.
Well, Scott and I like that you like watching Channel 8. I think that was a nice little plug right there.
Job security right there.
It is. No.
Well, Charlie, we want to thank you very much for joining us. You are definitely one of the players who, on the top of our heads, from the 90s that we remember watching. We looked up to, tried to emulate, certainly pitching, not very successful at it when I played. But we want to thank you very much for joining us.
No, thank you guys for having me. No, my pleasure. It was great. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Charlie.
Best of luck to you guys.
Absolutely. And big shout out to Nate with the Guardians for helping us set this up. Nate, we really appreciate that. And Charlie, enjoy the rest of your stay here in Cleveland. Maybe we'll catch you up. Who knows? If the Guardians make a playoff push, we'll maybe get in touch with you and maybe do some playoff preview.
That would be awesome.
All right, Charlie. Thanks a lot. Take care.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Well, John, as always, that was fun. Reliving some of the 90s. Charlie Nagy, he's a kind of a low-key guy. He's not going to be jumping up and down, which is okay. I like kind of low-key guys like that because you can kind of, when you talk to him, you kind of see inside him, that cerebral mentality when he's reliving some of the stories. And he's one of those guys. I always love watch pitching. He never got too emotional, right? He kind of kept a level, an even keel when he pitched. And you can kind of sense that when we talk to him here.
I always thought he was one of the most underappreciative and underrated players in those 90s teams. Kind of got overlooked a lot. He got overlooked with the namesakes of Orel Hershiser and Dennis Martinez, and then all the hitters.
Right. He didn't strike out a lot of guys. He had a kind of a sinker. So, he had a lot of guys put the ball in play, but he got outs. And when you look at his numbers, he was effective. There was about roughly a 5-year window, where he was, I forget what his numbers were, but, you go from like 90, well, he's in the All-Star game in 92. And then you go all the way to about 98, you look at some of those numbers, and especially in that era of high octane offense, call it whatever you want. He was a guy who could get guys out, wouldn't strike them out, but induce a lot of ground balls.
Yeah. 3-time All-Star in 92, 96, and then 99. I think that 96 year All-Star game 96 was what? Where was it? 97 was in Cleveland. 95 was Texas. 96 was it Baltimore?
Baltimore was 93. 94 was in Pittsburgh. 95 was in 95 was in Texas, wasn't it? 96. 96 I think was in Philly.
Okay.
I think I could be wrong on that. I have to look that up.
Anyway, you're right. It was 96.
Was it? Okay.
And that was the year. There's a picture taking on the field of all the Indians All-Stars, and Charlie was there with Albert Bell. I think Bell was in that home run derby that year as well.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
And then there's you see those big pictures of all, because those 90s Indians teams did so many. They're like the Yankees and Red Sox now.
Sure.
For the younger kids that don't remember or aware of how many players there were on the team representing the tribe at that point in time. And he was one of those guys in that 96 All-Star team that was there. A guy that, one thing I do like a lot about the fans' perspective of him, they never gave Charlie any grief of giving up that hit in 97.
No.
Because Jose Mesa was the one that blew the save and ultimately got all the grief, and still does to this day. But a class act all the way. It was great to hear him on the radio on that 11-game road trip recently here in the summer for the Guardians. And it was great to hear him on the radio. I'm driving into work, Scott, and I'm like, is that Charlie Nagy doing it with Jim Rosenhaus? So it was cool to see his perspective of the current Guardians as well. Right.
And maybe it's just a sign of me getting older, but I always love to ask a lot of the people we interview, okay, what are your kids? Do they remember you playing? Probably not. Do they ever look you up? And he was talking to his daughter's boyfriend, and he was saying how slow baseball is. Man, these guys are, because every 99 times out of 100, you look in the dugout and the manager, they look like they're just sitting there. Mm-hmm. And then he calls up the Lupinella, kicking the dirt thing. It's like, whoa, this was something else. And, look, it doesn't happen a lot anymore like that, but there were a lot of characters. It's neat to see that, the reaction from a lot of the players that we grew up, their kids who are now adults, looking back at their careers and those times.
Absolutely. Yeah. Great stories there from Charlie. It was amazing to catch up with him and give us his perspective on this current team, and also also going back in history there. Again, big shout out to Nate with the Guardians for helping us set that up, and big shout out to the Press Play Podcast for making this episode happen. Scott, I think I'll wrap it up here. We've took us some time off. We've got some good shows coming up in the hopper.
We do.
We want to thank everyone listening and subscribing on YouTube and Apple. And then remember, you can follow the pod at Sable Brothers on Twitter. You can follow me at John_ on Twitter as well.
And on me, Twitter as well, Scott Sable, FOX8. If you have any suggestions, criticisms, send us a message. We'd love to hear from you. And we're heading right into football season now. So it's going to be an interesting time here. We're going to probably we'll talk more about Guardians as well, and talk about the Browns too. Lot to come.
Yeah, should be a fun time. And thank you for listening, everyone. We'll check you guys next time.